taking, there's a 10-year property tax pledge, but our current terms are we're getting 15% of the sales tax revenue, so we get that off the top. And then any excess that's not required for debt service, we're splitting that with the developer towards repayment of the bonds that are backed by the developer, and then the additional comes back to the government. Last year we got over 400,000 on that excess, and probably a net of 300-some thousand on our initial share. So that's an example of a project where we're getting significant revenues based on the way the terms of that TIF were structured.
So I just want to clarify this. So we could do what she says if we structured the deal right to begin with.
Yes.
Bingo.
So can I just use one little, go ahead.
I just have one point of clarification. The state law says the only reason you get that $2 million in the first place is because through the development process, the state law first, and then the deal you signed, you can only spend it for this, which are TIF-related expenditures or the debt service on that. So the state law says as long as those expenditures and the debt service in place, all those revenues has to stay there. So you can't pull stuff out as long as there's things that you sign in a development agreement that says you'll fund. So if you don't fund the property tax in it, then you can take that out. But as whatever you committed to at the beginning as TIF revenues have to fund TIF expenditures.
But again, that's fine, but it's all how we write the agreement.
Right. Yeah,
So, and the simple way to explain it for people that aren't great at finance like myself is I have a car loan. And when I buy the car, I'm not making a lot of money, so I'm making just the regular monthly payment. And then I start making a lot of money, I'm still making, it's like saying I have to use all that extra money that I'm making to get my car paid off. I'm just suggesting we continue to make the regular monthly payment. We improve our fund balance by holding that cash back in our fund balance until we can grow our community and broaden our tax base. I'm just suggesting.
That would be moving forward, I think. Whereas, I mean, right now you have to live with the development you've executed.
We can't amend any of those.
It takes two of them, a developer and the UG, to amend them.
It's fine. I was just curious. We don't have to go back. I'm just asking.
It's a good point, and it's one, I guess, we use it now, but I think the mayor said it well. It's largely kind of that west-east, and projects come from west. We don't give them all the money. We don't let them keep all the public share of those dollars. In the greater percentages, we try to get that money coming back to us. You know, one that had a clause in it over a time period like was Kansas Speedway. A lot of people don't realize there was a funded amount of money that went to that from the sales tax dollars that went to the Speedway. They got the long-term abatement, but once they filled up their bucket that had so much money in reserves, then we started getting sales tax dollars from that project area, and I think we're getting, it ranges from $300,000 to $600,000 a year that we get into our general fund because that filled up and it amply covered what any of the bondholders felt was needed. But again, that was how the original bonds were structured when they were sold, to give a comfort level with the people that were buying $21 million worth of bonds that were dedicated back to the sales tax. So
that's good.
It's a tool. We need to keep using it, but I don't know where we have the opportunity, because it's not just the developer, it's everybody that bought the bond that has to sign off if you want to go back and change the structure of a deal. So you really, before you ever get that to happen.
But moving forward, you could do it. Moving forward, if something performed really well, it would be cash right away, because you're paying it back right away, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And
So it'd be cash.
we're writing that now every opportunity we get.
Yes.
Because now I think new deals move forward. I agree with that policy, that if it's overperforming, when it's overperforming,
Keep it.
we keep that money. I think we're doing that now in the recent deals, and we need to continue that moving forward. Okay, we need to keep moving. Is there anything else on this topic of fund balance and reserves? All right. Dave, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Dave.
Okay, great discussion. And we're going to move ahead now to discussing generally expenditures as they relate between public safety departments and the overall employee population.
Are we going to do mortgage registration fee?
apologize.
No problem.
I don't know if we have an update related to that in the legislative session. Oh. You want to give a brief? Okay.
We can skip it. We can keep moving.
Okay, we're going to keep moving. Okay, just let me take you back just for a minute. In October, one of the things that you said, a long-term strategy for increased revenue was, let's take a look at our unmet needs. And part of that was employee compensation. You said for 2015, one of your initial guidelines for the development of the 2015 budget was a comprehensive compensation and classification study for your employees. And you said, let's also take a look at all of our public safety departments, do a comprehensive review of those departments. So again, police, fire, and sheriff. Lou just shared with you information that employee expenditures are 75% plus of your overall budget. So these are pretty big issues. So we're going to take a look at kind of some of those numbers now, historically now, and kind of a projection into the future. With that, I'll turn it over to Reggie.
What we have on the screen here are our non-public safety departments. This is part of the $296 million budget that we have. And these are all departments outside of public safety. And it shows the growth from 2006 to 2013 was around 1.3%.
And I might just add, these are, if you were at the State of the Government address, these are the slides, these next several slides are ones that were presented at that time as well.
Next, we have the public safety departments. Here we have the police department. From the same time, from 2006 to 2013, they grew at 14.7%. Here I've added the fire department. They grew at 33.9%. Some of the growth that the fire department experienced was they had personnel growth also, and then they had also fuel from 2006 to 2013 where the cost had increased. Also, they have drug supplies and medical supplies that are within this budget that have also increased. And also, the next department, the sheriff's department, they grew at a rate of almost 55% from 2006 to 2013. Some of the things that went on in between 2006 and 2013 is that the sheriff took on a double bunking initiative within this time period. Also, park rangers moved from the parks department within this time period, which is an increase to this budget. Also,
What was the approximate amount of that move?
almost $900,000.
So it was less than $1 million.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Also, they have experienced increase in their medical contracts for inmates in this budget also. And some of the costs are related to personnel. This next slide here shows the number of budgeted employees for civilian and sworn. You can see where the civilian was cut from 1,400 to around 1,100 in the time frame of 2005 to 2013, and the sworn moved up from 900 to almost 1,000 in 2013. Here's a view of all the departments as far as non-public safety, police department, fire department, and sheriff department, and the growth that they've had from 2006 to 2013.
So can you go back? This is an interesting question. Can you go back to the employee? Go one more right here. The issue is not only have we refilled public safety positions, we've actually increased the number of public safety employees overall. So the police, fire, and sheriff are all at their highest sworn strength in history. Now, if you look at our rest of the employees, we've actually cut departments. We've actually decreased the total number of employees in those departments by 22%. So one of the ways that we've held the line with increased costs for fuel, increased costs for healthcare, increased costs for salaries in our non-public safety employees is we've reduced the number of employees by almost 22%. One of the reasons that our public safety has gone up, not only have we not frozen positions, but we've actually added positions in addition to the costs of going up for pension and healthcare and operations. So the way we balanced the budget, when you saw the 1.3% for all other departments, the way we kept those total expenditures down was cutting personnel 22%. Does that make sense? And the reason that we've seen the increase in public safety, because of the cost of doing business have gone up, and we have not only not reduced personnel, we've actually increased personnel. And that's the dramatic difference between all other departments and public safety that I think is illustrative of the situation that we have. Because 75% of our budget is on this slide. Of our general fund budget, 75% of our general fund budget is the employees on this slide.
Yeah, so.
Well, but Mayor, overall, we're down 200 employees. And, you know, having, again, been in staff, now I'm sitting here and I'm looking at what the priorities are for the people on our survey, and almost universally, it was public safety. And our highest performance, you know, the greatest satisfaction is in public service, or public safety.
That's right.
So I know those two seem disproportionate, but the only way we were able to, and some would say, it may be, you know, I'm sure that the chiefs of police and the sheriff and the various heads of public safety would tell you that more boots on the ground have been at least a factor in the reduction of crime overall.
Well, this is exactly the dilemma we're in, because, and I'll come to the others as well. This is exactly the dilemma we're in. We have funded the priorities of our organization, right? Our community has said this is what we want, and we funded it. There's no denying this has been in keeping with our priorities. The challenge we have is, in order to help make that happen, we've had to cut the rest of our departments down pretty close to the bone. And we are going to, and I have not said this isn't a good idea, I've said it's not sustainable. That if we continue to increase public safety at the percentages we are over the next 9 years, we're going to have to continue to drop the employees in every other department. And we also saw a lot of customer dissatisfaction, a lot of dissatisfaction in customer service and in street maintenance, because one of the ways we balanced our budget is we're doing half the capital maintenance and improvement we were doing during this prior. We've cut our capital maintenance in half, which is the first priority. We've cut all other departments in customer service, which is a top priority. And we've actually increased our mill levy, and reducing taxes is a top priority. So this is where I've said it's not that we're not doing what people have asked, but one of the things we need to do is study these three departments, which is something we've committed to doing, to make sure that, because I think what we'll see, we need to look at the data, but we need to look at the data and say, as we've increased these budgets X percent, have we seen an X percent decrease in crime? Have we seen an X percent decrease in response time? And then the question is not whether or not this is a priority. This is a top priority of mine, and we have world-class public safety that I'd put up to anybody in the world, frankly. The question is it sustainable over time? I think that's the question. So Commissioner Markley and then Kane.
I will just go back to
and then
say.
I'd like to speak too, Mayor.
Okay.
I'll just go
Just
back
a minute,
to saying
Maddox.
what I wanted to say from the moment I got on this commission. We need the salary survey, because what I want to make sure we're not seeing, we know that we've cut other departments and that we haven't given raises because of the recession. What I don't want us to do is say, public safety, you've maintained your salary when we cut everybody else's, so now we're going to cut your salary too, if in fact they're being paid on par with other counties and cities in the area. So what I want to know is the salary they're getting just high for our organization because we've cut everybody else? Or is it
That's
high
right.
because they're being overpaid in relationship to other fire and police forces in the area? So I want my salary survey because I think that information is going to be important in deciding whether it's just been a matter of their unions being able to ride out the recession with more influence than maybe our other employees, and so they're actually paid appropriately and everybody else is underpaid, or whether they are overpaid and then that's a different issue.
Kane?
Well, the 9.6%, I don't think that's fair because of lack of leadership at the park rangers, we moved them into the sheriff's department. And that's why that number went up. And then I don't know who all was here when we were asking everybody for the sales tax. I don't remember which commissioners here and which weren't.
We were here.
We were here.
Right? But when we asked everybody, it was apparent then, and it's apparent now, this is what the people want. You know, and I think there's things that we can bring that company in that says you can put your fire station here and you get better service. I'm all for that stuff. But I don't believe that number is accurate with 9.6, considering what happened with the park rangers. But I don't know about the 21%, although I do think that if you look at, I guess it was on last night's news, that the average American has got 52 cents an hour raise in the last 2 years, and yet we've frozen all our employees 4 out of the last 5. So when we're looking at the budget, that's something short-term and long-term, and I agree, Angela, that we need to look and see what the other places are doing, but I also don't want to provide less service.
So the question then is, and actually this is a quick question, what's the total number of sheriff's department employees as a result of the park rangers? How many people did that represent? 7.
Sure, fast
According-
in the back.
So 9? 11 total. So of the 100, about 11 of them are park rangers. That move was made in,
09, I believe.
Well,
09.
that's your number. That's the 9.6.
no, it's not. It's not 9.6. That's only 11 of the 100. That's
Oh.
only 1% of the 9.6%.
Okay.
But there are always things to qualify within that, and that is like, we made the decision to go to double bunking. That means you had to add more staff in the sheriff's department in order to do that as a cost savings initiative. So you got to break each thing down to
Right.
truly get the full analysis
That's
of
right.
it. And I think that's where Commissioner Kane's coming from.
Walters.
I just wanted to remind you that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Maddox did call in, and then I'll go to Walters. Maddox?
Yes, sir. And sorry, Walters. My concern is that I wanted to challenge, not necessarily challenge, but ask Doug as we move forward and put in place the new police chief, that we survey our department. I'm not sure that we may need more funds, but I think we need to look at each procedure that we use because sometimes the services are just not reaching the community the way they should. And so I'm hoping that we don't always have to spend money when there is a void, but we may have to look at the procedure and the process in which the services are going forward. So I'm hoping that our new county administrator, and good luck, and good luck and congratulations, Doug, but would also team up with the new police chief when he or she arrives, and they would look at each department and find out how we can polish up services to better reach the community. I know one concern is that the current community policing structure is not fit or is outdated. So to look at those things and find out how to reach people is important. The second thing I wanted to know, has the 3/8 tax sunset, or what funds were taken from the 3/8 tax, and did it qualify and put more policemen in the department? And if it's still there, what is it doing at this moment? And then I wanted to know, this is somewhat off the subject, I wanted to know, and maybe I missed this, will the Hollywood Casino put their shovel in the ground in March like they had mentioned, or are they paying the city the now $1 million, which was a penalty? And if they are paying that penalty, where is that funding going in regards to the budget?
Okay, let's answer those two questions. One, does the 3/8 sales tax have a sunset?
Yes, in 2020.
2020 is the sunset, and where is the hotel for the casino? They're not yet paying the penalty because we gave them an extension.
That is correct. So we gave them until the 1st of May to come back before us and make a go, no-go commitment to the unified government. If they do a no-go at that time, then they would owe us a penalty. If they say they're going to go, then their next hurdle is they need to be under construction by, I believe it was October 1. And assuming they start as committed at that point, then they would not pay the penalty. If they don't start by October 1, then the penalty would come back in, and they'd still owe it for this year. And it's an annual penalty that if they don't, they could start something January of 2015, they wouldn't have to pay the 15 penalty, but if they don't do that, then they would have it.
Okay, and it would be an annual penalty for every year they don't start. So, but we're not collecting that at this point.
No, sir.
Right, and I apologize. I thought I thought we had moved the date back to March 1st and not May 1st. So that's my correction. But also, if those funds go in, where do they go into the budget again? Where do they fit into this process?
That is a commitment. I believe it's on the city side of our contract, as we entered into that as the city of Kansas City, Kansas with them. So that would be to our city general fund for you to then divvy out as you deem appropriate.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, and then, you said the 3/8 tax is set to sunset in 2020. But I'd like to know whether Lou is there, whether Reggie can speak to it. Where has the funding gone yearly from the 3/8 tax? Has it gone to police? Has it gone to sidewalk? Where is it going?
A third of it goes to police, and a third of it goes to fire, and a third of it goes to public infrastructure. And it's a $6.5 million budget, so each of them get around $2 million each year.
Okay, and thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, Commissioner Walters.
Just a quick question. I think I heard you say that one of the reasons that the fire department costs went up was related to fuel costs.
Yes.
So are these personnel numbers? Are they?
No, these are total budgets. This right here is a personnel number, but
So some of the slides relate to personnel and some of the slides relate to
No,
overall?
the one before that, this
These
one relates to
slides are-
total expenditures.
yeah,
So we don't have personnel costs related to these three categories?
the personnel cost is included in it.
Well, I know, I understand, but I think some
Separated
people
out.
are confused thinking that people's personnel costs went up this much money, whereas in reality, you're saying the entire department costs went up
Yes.
that much money.
Yes, and in fact, that's true on the other slide too, because we had fuel costs go up for our public works
Okay.
dramatically on that slide. So that includes increases in total expenditures for all departments. That includes healthcare increases, personnel increases, it includes capital, includes everything else. So what it shows is that the way we've gotten to this 1.3% is by cutting 20% out of the personnel in our all other departments. That's what it shows. Now, it doesn't show a lot of other detail. It's more of a general statement. So that's where the other piece that I want to say is where innovation comes in, and this has been my point. This is why we need to do these comprehensive studies in every department, our big public safety departments, because there's innovation. You know, the sheriff's already brought to us a bunch of opportunities to reduce his budget. That includes including the double bunking. If we get the juveniles out of there, which is a capital expense up front, if we could do some more diversion programs, more programs with mental health, if there are things that we could do, they brought to us a recommendation to do a study. So the sheriff's department is looking at some things that we need, that they've asked to be studied to see which ones would bang the biggest bang for the buck. The other thing that other cities are doing, they're doing comprehensive studies of fire and police that show operations. A lot of communities, because of the budget pressures, are doing more with less without compromising the safety of the employees or the community. And that's where those studies are going to be critically important, because whatever decisions we make about this have to be data-driven. If we're going to add boots to the ground, it has to be for a data-driven purpose to make sure that it's responding to a need. That's where these studies are so important to get funded and get underway right away. The sooner we have that data, the better decisions we'll be able to make about overall operational expenses and not just how many people do we need to have. Well, that should be driven by the need. How many stations do we have? Where do they need to be located? How many people do you need in those stations in order to have the response time that we need for the level of safety that we expect? Those are all the kinds of data that these studies are going to drive, and we're going to learn more about this next week when ICMA comes in and does a presentation to our command staffs and to our unions and to us. So I think that's going to be very helpful information. Commissioner Walker and I got a partial presentation about that at the National League of Cities in Seattle, and I thought it was very informative. It was very informative. So that's where data and innovation are going to come in, because public safety is not coming off our priority list. Clearly, not coming off our priority list.
So I have a question about, just real easy, about staffing. So just employees, has the number of firemen and policemen that we have the ability to hire, I know it goes up and down because of retirements and the availability of academies and stuff, but in general, have the number of positions we have available for firemen and policemen gone up in the last 5 years?
Yes. I mean, and if you think about some of them, we increased in fire personnel because we had the SAFER grant access. So that provided us some grant funding opportunities. So not all of that was a cost increase as to what we had in that area.
Okay, but I'm just asking about the number of staff. So by how much for fire and by how much for police? Are we talking 10 police officers over the last 5 years we've increased our workforce, 10 firemen, or are we talking?
What, do we have it broke out? You know, I mean, the number they showed up there was 100, broke out over the 3 different areas. I don't have the individual breakouts unless you guys have them as to what we have. I think probably a little more in the sheriff. We did the double bunking. We did some of the initiatives there to help make some savings back on. So on a percentage of the department, the sheriff's department got a higher increase. Fire had the good increase from SAFER, but I'd have to look at the numbers to
But
see
with
unless
sheriff,
you know them.
the difference is, right? I mean, just so I know I'm thinking this right. But with the sheriff department, we did that because in the long run, we'll save money.
Yes.
Okay,
That's the goal.
a big
That's the goal.
difference.
That's
That's
right.
a big difference between hiring additional officers that we're not sure.
No.
That's right on. That's-
Look, this is exactly the point. My only point of this data is we need to be aware of it as we move into our budgeting, because these are our 3 largest, most expensive, and highest valued departments. And that's where it gets tricky, because if it were on the low priority list, well, we'd fix it in a hurry, wouldn't we? The issue with public safety is it's at our highest priority list, which means we've got to find a way to deliver the service. And we also have to be aware that the cost, this is a very expensive service to deliver. That's where we need to make sure we're making data-driven decisions. The sheriff brought to us, and Commissioner, you and I were there when they did this. The sheriff came in and said, look, if I could double bunk, you'd add X number of more people in my department, we'd double bunk and it'd reduce our overtime and our farm out costs.
By like $1 million.
Yeah, and so we were willing to make that increase in order to save that money. I'm not saying any of this is a bad decision. I'm pointing out that it's an expensive decision, long term. And that's where we need to make sure, and the next slide too, I think, or the previous slide to this too is important, which is where we've cut a lot of personnel out of a lot of departments that have really strapped a lot of our customer service delivery. And it's allowed us to maintain, but we need to know that this has been a part of the process. That's the key. Kane.
Well, you know, when we were interviewing fire chiefs, one of the things that we did is we added a assistant fire chief, because everybody came in and goes, well, I don't have who's my right-hand person, because we didn't have one. So the things that we don't necessarily see, such as Jeff Fuel is going to get awarded the Jail Administrator of the Year for the work that he's done, such as double bunking and everything else. And that's the kind of stuff, one, I wish he was here to say this, but Sheriff Ash is back there. But there's some stuff that we don't necessarily know. I only know it because I know him really well. We've done a good job. The people are asking us to continue to do a good job. And this goes into when they come in and say, okay, the pole barn that we have on 123rd and Leavenworth Road for the millionth and one time, you know, that we need to stick a fire station and a police substation here. And in the long run, it will serve the people, and it's I guess in a way you can look at it, or the way I look at it, is when General Motors went to robots, nobody got laid off. The manpower stayed the same. And I think that when we're looking at all this stuff, that I don't want to lose any manpower, and yes, we do need to more innovation, more stuff that can help them do their job better. But no matter where we go in the entire community, they continually say police, fire, and sheriff. Doesn't matter where you're at. And they've said it year in and year, for the whole 9 years I've been here, you know, year in and year out. So this, and you're right, we do have to take a serious look at it because it is expensive. But I guess another way I look at it, because I only worked in safety for 21 years, is how important or how much is a life worth?
Right.
All right. Are we looking at?
Or we could continue through at least Reggie's got the next portion too, and then maybe break and continue working through lunch. What's the pleasure of the mayor and commission?
It's up to you. Do you want to break now for lunch and come back for a working lunch, or do you want to get through one? How many slides are in the next one?
About 7.
Well, let's keep going.
All right.
The next group of slides are looking at overtime and out-of-class pay for employees across the organization.
Can you describe what out-of-class pay is?
Out-of-class pay is when an employee is working in another position that is above his. For instance, if an assistant chief is working in the chief's position or so, he would get out-of-class pay for working in the chief's position.
So, for instance, if the chief went on vacation for a week, the assistant chief would be paid as the chief for a week. Is that correct?
No, that's actually, you wouldn't pay them till they were actually in that role for 30 days. The out-of-class comes into play usually effectively right away on our union personnel. So a better example might be if a sergeant assumed a captain's position on a daily basis, they would get that out-of-class pay. In the command ranks, they typically have to be in that role for about 30 days before they would.
And for what about our civilian ranks for the non-union?
You can work them as hard as you want.
Yeah, I mean, our personnel policy says when they have assumed a acting capacity for 30 days. Now, if we move somebody into an interim role, then we've classified them into that title and assume responsibility, but the acting, and that's what out-of-class pay is, really that acting. So if someone's an acting sergeant for a day, or they're paid, if they're an acting supervisor in the office out at NRC, they're not going to receive anything.
Right.
So this is primarily affects our public safety, the out-of-class pay.
Public safety,
And
you
the
also can
public
have some
works.
in some, yeah.
Public Works, that's right.
And it's a little bit different in the language within those contracts, but yeah.
Yep.
So what we see here is public safety, out-of-class and overtime pay combined was up $1.8 million from 2006 to 2013. And for non-public safety, it was up $532 million. The number for
Thousand, please. Not million.
532, yes, 532,000. The number for public safety that it is at in 2013 was $4.9 million, and for non-public safety it was at $1.5 million.
So, wait a minute. So last year, we paid $5 million in overtime to civilian, probably mostly union employees.
A combination of out-of-class
No, I
pay.
don't mean that, Mike. I mean union and out of class. I'm sure there's some supervisors. And last year, we paid somewhere between $1.5 million on public safety. Presumably, again, a small amount of it was administration and a large part of it was union. Is that correct?
And $1.5 million for the public safety,
Yeah, right.
yeah, and that would include like public works.
So
also.
we went over budget. I'm sure you budgeted something in there, but $6.5 million of our budget was overtime and out of class pay.
Yes.
Wow. Now, is that symptomatic of why did that happen? How does that happen? I understand we got guys go out on plows when it snows and they get overtime for that kind of thing. How does that happen in fire and police? Is it a management issue, an administration issue? No, tough question with the new boss sitting right there, but it's the kind of question that is, I don't have any problem paying overtime where we actually have to have it, but something's telling me that $6.5 million is a hell of a lot more overtime than we really need to pay.
I'm probably in a better position than Reggie to answer that, and it is one of defining many of the areas we've hammered down on, and I will say we've had some progress, but there is some language within some of our agreements that cause us specific areas that have thrown red flags up. And I know Chief Hansen was here, I don't know if she's still here, but she's started working on language with the union groups where we were having high numbers in some of our acting sergeant capacity and the amount of overtime that was going to a few in that area, and we've had great progress, I think, in trying to address that problem, and it's been one that's been outstanding for a couple of years. Some come with the ebbs and flows of personnel, so when we drop down in certain areas, how we have staffed back into those areas for response times has played into it pretty heavy, and that's primarily what you'll see in the fire department.
And I think the issue and this is the issue why I think this is important.
Yeah, I think
It would make sense in our non-public safety where we've reduced overall staffing by 20%, that your overtime would go up some. When we've increased staffing overall in public safety, the highest staffing levels ever, our overtime's going up.
That doesn't go together.
It does not go together.
I just said that to Commissioner Markley. That doesn't go together. It's the one departments where we're hiring more people, and yet the overtime is going up. What's happening? They're not managing less resources. They're managing more.
Maybe Reggie's going to get to this. I have that same question, and I'm not going to say that it's unnecessary. Again,
Yeah.
public safety is our priority, clearly, and if that's the case, if it's manipulation or collusion between workers, taking time off,
But that's a
shift
manager
trading,
issue,
whatever,
not an officer issue.
scheming, which I'm not going to say that occurs, but I'm not going to say it doesn't, then we need to fix it. $6.5 million go a long way to doing some other things we all want to do, like build a new fire station out in Piper. And I got no problem with a guy earning overtime, and if we need him to do overtime, then so be it. But I had no idea we were paying that kind of money in overtime.
Well, he's got 7 slides, and I think we need to
Okay,
continue
I'm
this.
sorry.
No, we need to continue this conversation.
Mayor.
Yes, Commissioner Maddox.
Yes, sir. If I may add in, we also just suspended the reserve program. And I remember, I don't remember who said it. I think it was Doug that said it was about 20 reserve officers. I guess we were out of compliance with state procedures or whatever be the case. How does the reserves play into that? Do we hire more reserves? I mean, those are all questions that play back into what I was saying, that I hope that Mrs. Hansen and Doug and then the new police chief would survey departments and just survey those things so we can save money. So that's my question. How do the reserves play into that? Because $5 million is a crazy number.
How do the reserves play into our budget?
Some of the state law changes now, I'll say it this way, we require reserves to volunteer so much time for us now some of the state law changes as they go through certification. We'll have to pay them a certain amount of money, though I would probably say that's nominal. One of the things that I've had discussions with the chief about is we've used a few of our reserves in an active way that offsets budget, but probably not overall. And that's an area that we're looking at, that as we work to reinstate the reserve program, that those officers that come back in as reserves, we're getting a true value back to our government for the, in about 16 hours a month, I think is what they have done, and we'll structure how that goes forward. But we get a true value for what it is. And I think we did off some, but probably not overall.
That's right. Okay. Reggie, keep going.
This slide here breaks out of class pay and overtime pay for the sheriff, police, and the fire department. This line right here is the sheriff, and this one's the police and the fire. The sheriff, their overtime over the time period of 2006 to 2013 was $2.2 million. Some things that are attributable to that are with their double bunking. They have mandatory overtime, so some of this overtime is built in. Also, they lose folks to attrition throughout the year, and when that happens, they have to have another recruit class before they can bring folks on. This year we dealt with where they're going to have multiple recruit classes, so we're hoping this number will go down. Some of the other things they have people in the military that end up going away, and they end up having to pay overtime for that. Police department, their overtime and out-of-class pay was actually went down $1.4 million over the 2006 to 2013 time frame.
But Reggie, I don't mean to interrupt you, but we're just guessing. We don't know the answer. Why do we not know the answer?
What answer?
Why do we not know the answer and what caused these spikes in overtime? I hear us saying, well, sometimes
we know the answer. We know the answers to why these overtime numbers are here. I think the first thing is to look at the numbers, and then we have answers to this. I mean,
what is the answer? Why are we seeing these?
You have a slide with the answers coming up.
No, well,
Yeah, I'm with you.
well, some of the things I discussed, like some of the overtime, as far as mandatory overtime is built into this number. And also, in the past, they only had one recruit class each year. And when they lost folks, they didn't have people to fill those positions. So that drove the overtime also. Also, they have folks going off into the military as far as to cover that. Those are some of the problems.
Well, and you can see the police line. And can I make a request that anytime we have police, fire, sheriff, we always have police blue, fire red, and sheriff green or yellow, because I'm not smart enough to translate that in my head. So the fire is the yellow, but you see the trend from the fire department was around $200,000 in 2006, and it's now at $1.2 million in terms of overall overtime. The police, you saw that spike in 2012. The other thing about these, and I've asked a lot of questions. When I was first sworn in last summer, I asked questions. It was brought to my attention that the overtime was climbing. I asked that it be addressed. It's taken a long time, and this is where this open data of having this data readily available, it's taken a long time to gather this data in terms of putting it together and gleaning it out of the budgets and finding out where it is. And I think that overtime and out-of-class pay go together, and we should always keep them together because they're related. But one of the things that I want is there's specific contract language in all of these contracts that specify when we have to pay overtime and when we have to pay out-of-class pay, that are expensive clauses in our contracts. We need to be aware of what those clauses are. The other issue is there's not been a change in contract, but there's a change in interpretation in terms of how you deploy that overtime and out-of-class pay. And so we need to understand, number one, my goal today, number one, is to understand this, because the police, for instance, one of the things I learned as I dug into it, you had 20 or 30 sergeants making literally $25,000 and $30,000 a year in overtime each, while 150 members of the police department didn't get any overtime. So you have 150 people in the department who got zero overtime, and you had 20 or 30 people getting literally $25,000 in overtime each. Well, that's a management problem that has to change. Huh? And then you also look at, Hal, to your point, $5 and $6 million in overtime would give a cost of living increase to every single employee in this organization. We could give $5 million, we could give a 3% increase, cost of living to every single employee for the same amount of money, and we have a handful of folks, because if you look at the position by position in each department, which I have glanced through, it's a very interesting report, I'd be glad for all of you to look at. There tends to be, if you also look at the percentage of pay for each department, those departments average 4 to 6% across the department in terms of pay increase with that overtime and out-of-class pay, while all our other people are at zero. So we have a handful of departments that get more overtime than others, and it's very expensive. And I think it's low-hanging fruit when we're looking at fund balance and other things that we need to do. We need to drive down our overtime costs. Now, here's to Markley's point. Are we paying people adequately so that, are they counting on overtime as salary, as a salary increase, that they count on that overtime because we're paying less than other departments? That's a question that we need to find out with our salary study, to say, is the overtime just covering a cost of living increase that people are counting on, or is it actual money that can be driven down? But as you see, at the direction it's going, I wonder about that. I think we need to ask those questions. Commissioner Maddox?
Yes, sir. And if I may add, I'd like to throw in tag enforcement. Is tag enforcement used to reach quotas? Then did the money from the quotas then go into the funding or paid of officers? Because that's a concern, because if I'm on the second floor of City Hall, the majority of people I see are people who live in the 1st District or the 4th District who are receiving tickets from the tag enforcement.
Okay.
So where is the funding going? How does the revenue from tickets yearly play into that?
For tag enforcement?
Maybe we could have the sheriff come back at another time and respond to that specific operation. I will say there is not a directive of quota to go get for tag enforcement, but we could probably provide the commissioner with an explanation of how our tag enforcement program works as a follow-up.
Yeah, that's a fair follow-up question. Okay, Reggie, let's keep moving.
Fire department, they're at, as far as the comparison with the rest of them, they're at $1.2 million of overtime and out-of-class pay in 2013. And here in 2006, they had around $250,000. This next slide drills down into overtime, just overtime by itself. And we see for the public safety, it was up $1.6 million from 2006 to 2013. And it was up $329,000 for non-public safety from 2006 to 2013.
Right.
And this slide right here breaks down overtime for police, fire, and sheriff. Numbers here are $881,000 for the sheriff. Also for the police department, they were down $178,000. The number is $1.3 million. Here for the fire department, we're at $1 million. That's how much they're spending, and it's actually up $940,000 from 2006. This right here is a breakdown of just out-of-class pay by itself. You see the public safety is up $164,000, and the non-public safety is up $191,000. Right here we have the out-of-class for police, fire, and sheriff. can see fire department's at around 200,000. Sheriff has increased to a little less than 200,000, and police departments, theirs is actually kind of flat compared to 2006. Recently, as Doug discussed, they had worked with their bargaining union to slash out-of-class pay here recently.
Is that all the slides?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So I think one of the things we're going to need to drill down into for our budget, we have a $4 million projected shortfall for this year, where we're going to reduce our fund balance from $6 million to $2 million. Moody's has said that puts us at risk for a downgrade in our credit rating. One of the ways I think we can look at now is when we have $6.5 million organization-wide in overtime, is that a place that we can take action now in March to affect our bottom line by December, that we can protect our fund balance? I think that's a legitimate question that we need to find answers to. Lunch was the only comment I heard after that presentation, so we will now break for lunch, and we'll take about a 15-minute break, and then we can continue to finish our lunch while we start back up so we can keep moving. Yeah.